Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Thursday, August 1st, 2019. Welcome to August. How's it going so far? Pretty good. I'd say best month of the year to date. I guess that's all we've got really going for us. It's the doldrums, the dog day. It's not really. Does it feel like dog days? I don't think so. And are there official dog days of August? My dogs used to tell me every day is Dogs Day. I don't have dogs, and that's part of the reason why. They're very selfish, I think. Okay, all right. I'm just kidding. I don't mean to offend everybody with dogs. It is, as I said, first day of August 2019. There was another debate yesterday because we have 500 candidates, and that's the way we have to do things now. Once again, I managed to not see the debate. They put these on at very inconvenient times, I think, and also everyone in my house hates them, and so I have difficulty getting permission to put them on the television, even for a short while. I depend on all of you who watch the debates to tweet out what happened, to live blog what happened, to come on the show and discuss what happened. As a matter of fact, that's what we'll do today. We are without Greg Dworkin during his vacation. However, we have with us this morning Ian Reifowitz will join us. It's about time we had him back again to discuss things because, as you know, of course, he's got a new book out, The Tribalization of Politics, How Limbaugh's Race-Baiting Rhetoric on Obama Paved the Way for Trump. And though we've discussed the book already a number of times, I mean, nothing could be timelier at this point than discussing Trump's racism. And there's probably no one better to discuss it with, no one more studied and researched in how this came about and how did we even get to the place. This is one of the more amazing phenomena of the whole thing. The day after day, Trump begins by speaking to the press, by putting this virulent racism on display, and they come back day after day as if he were just actually president of the United States because he wears a suit. He doesn't have presidential hair even. He just has this ridiculous stuff. And, I'm astounded every day that people come back for more, although I guess, they face the same problem. What do you do with the rest of your life if your job is to cover what the President of the United States says and everyone is still convinced that you're the President of the United States, no matter what you do, no matter what you say? I've always found it amazing that no one feels it's necessary to comment on the fact that either he's a virulent racist, although that now gets commentary, but not to his face. And speaking of his face, I mean, I hate to go this low on things, but I mean, the guy paints his face orange every day. And everybody is just like, well, he's trying to look tan. Tan is a real color, and it's obvious, and people know it. And what he's doing is putting orange on his face, and no one wants to say that it looks ridiculous. But I don't know. I guess we're at the anything goes stage of politics and everything else, for that matter, because, another topic on the table. This one I don't think we'll discuss with Ian, but I mean, it was in the New York Times, and he's in New York. It may be that he read the newspaper as the rest of you did. I'll just mention in passing, then, that Jeffrey Epstein apparently has... we've got Ian calling in right now, so I guess, Ian, good morning, Ian. You'll be forced to hear this, I think. This is not a topic I will require you to discuss. However, I do note for the record that the New York Times says that Jeffrey Epstein at some point has discussed with other people who he meant to hear this and maybe even meant to repeat it. He has decided that he wants to have his head cryogenically frozen, which isn't the weird part. He's decided, he also, I guess, thinks that it ought to be preserved for the future. His head and his penis should be frozen, I guess, for revival at some later date. I've never heard of anybody, I've heard of a few people saying they want their heads frozen, and I guess I thought that the whole idea was that they would be attached to another body or some robotic body. But Jeffrey Epstein taking things just one step further and, leave it to Jeffrey Epstein to decide what else has to be frozen. That did not come up at the debate even once, and I am shocked. But and it's also not in your book. But good morning, Ian.
And good morning to you, David.
Hi.
Yeah, I remember that Ted Williams also wanted to have his head frozen.
Yeah.
I hadn't heard about the old below the belt freezing before.
Right.
Mr. Epstein. I'm trying to come up with something. It's sort of like a half, baseball god, half Hitlerian master race kind of thing for Jeffrey Epstein. Very strange.
There's this splendid splinter connection, I guess you could say. I don't know what we're really going to say about that. I never heard anybody admit aloud. I mean, I guess I haven't heard him say it. But based on reports of 4 people who know him well, and I guess are ashamed of it now, somebody thought that was an essential to carry along with you into the future. There'll probably be something better invented at some point. I would guess if you're frozen several thousand years in the future, everyone will laugh at your archaic attachment, I think, by that point. But, this is a central part of his life. Obviously, he hasn't let it keep him, say, within the bounds of law or morality at any point. So it's very important to him. He clearly worships it. And I guess you could relate it back to the ancient burial practices, right? I'll need this in the next life. I definitely have to take this with me.
Oh, my. I guess, the pharaohs had a lot of their stuff buried with them, including, if I remember right, their servants, which wasn't a particularly nice employer-employee relations practice. At least Jeffrey Epstein has talked about doing that.
Yeah, so as far as we know, although he has talked about repopulating the planet with his DNA, which honestly is just bad math. 20 women at a time on a Santa Fe, New Mexico ranch, or somewhere in New Mexico. Anyway, I don't want to tar Santa Fe with this if it's in the wrong place, but should be an interesting read at some point. Like I said, though, it didn't come up in the debate. I don't think there's anything particularly racist about it necessarily, but if we dig deeper, you never know. However, most eyes, I think, are on were on the debate last night, even though it did come up at about the same time. But because candidates had not prepared answers on what parts of them are likely to be frozen, it just didn't come up. So we're lucky in that sense.
Yeah, I'd be curious. I think Tulsi Gabbard would have the most interesting frozen part.
That could be true. And who knows? She may already have things frozen from herself, someone else. She may not be unique among the field. We don't know. But that's because of the terrible moderators who didn't even ask one question about it.
No, I bet Marianne Williamson, though, has investigated the dark psychic forces required for freezing.
That could be. Yeah, I'd have to guess that they're probably the two most likely to have literature, let's say, maybe from such a company that might do that. I don't know whether that's based on anything, but at least they split them up on the debate stage last time. I don't know how they did in the first round. I forget by now who was together in the first round of things. But you did watch the debates, and I didn't get to. So if you don't mind, and if you're even in the least bit interested in sharing what you observed yesterday, and we can of course share in the second hour what was rounded up on the Daily Kos front page. But you're a pretty avid watcher, regular watcher of the debates, right?
Yeah, I did. I did watch both the debates this week. The most interesting comment I heard, actually, which fit with my own thinking, was that the winner of last night's debate was actually Elizabeth Warren. She was so much better on Tuesday night than any of the people were on Wednesday night.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like a real dazzler last night.
No. Look, long story short is that Biden did much better than he did the previous month. But again, that's not saying much.
All right. It's important to try.
Right. He wasn't great by any means, but he wasn't he was able to respond. He was lively. He was energetic, but no, he was not great. But Kamala Harris was not as good as she was in the first debate, although she wasn't terrible either. She was fine, but I mean, her first debate performance was incredible, and sort of ask her to live up to that standard again is a tough thing. But she didn't have she didn't dominate the. I don't think she's going to get a bump out of this. I think what's going to happen now basically is that you had a few candidates who I thought did really well last night, and that and $5 will get them a cup of coffee. Kirsten Gillibrand was very good. Cory Booker was very good. Even de Blasio, I thought, was very strong on his progressive stuff. But it's not going to matter because there's no, they're not going to break out of the 1 or 2% that they're stuck in. This is the first round, and things get serious when you knock out everybody who's not, getting at least a couple of %. I mean, I even think at this point most people are probably ready to move to a 5-candidate stage. Most voters are ready to move to a 5-candidate stage. That's not going to happen in September, but we are going to move to a single stage with probably somewhere between 7 and 10 people. Look, the debate was again an attempt by CNN to do the to pick at and to provoke the differences between the candidates. I remember when the Republicans had 20 people on this, 10 people on each stage, that most of the time they were given the opportunity to complain about Barack Obama and to attack Democratic and progressive policies. Whereas here, all the moderators were interested in doing was at getting the Democrats to attack each other. It was substantive in that they talked about some fine-grained policy differences, and that's an impressive thing, I think. But it definitely was not the kind of debate you would have had if the candidates were asked specifically about Trump and his policies and how they would differ from from the Trump administration. Most of all they were was asked was how you would differ from one another.
Yeah, I mean that's obviously an important function of the debates and of the primaries itself. But yeah, I mean it is a little bit odd. I mean, with a president like this one looming so large in terms, of his which we'll get to in a minute. I guess the racism. Although I guess I was also a little bit glad for a little respite from discussion of that. Although I don't want anybody to forget it, and I don't think anybody can. But it's nice that we didn't go into a fifth or sixth news cycle that was entirely dominated by Trump trying to inflame his base and dig even deeper into this hole of racism that he's digging for himself. But yeah, and I guess this is to be expected at this point from CNN. This is what they think gets them ratings. And in fact, it's what I saw them tweeting about this morning was, we did better in the ratings than the other reality shows that we consider ourselves a part of that genre. And we beat the other reality shows on television. So people are interested. It's a little weak, but okay, I can get past it. No major disasters and no big movement from out of the debate last night. I think we can all handle that as a message.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, look, what was it more interesting than The Bachelorette? I don't know because I didn't watch The Bachelorette. But I did hear that some crazy, went down on The Bachelorette. But I'll leave that. We'll leave that to other media to discuss, right, David?
Okay, I think so. I say I'm clueless there. Did it? Oh my God, really? Who? I don't know any of the people on there.
Well, you'll have to go Google it afterwards.
Yeah, I guess so. Well, all right. So we got something else to talk about at the 10 o'clock hour if necessary.
Right. I mean, they did talk a lot about healthcare. They about Medicare for all, and again, CNN tried to get everybody to be very worked up about people, quote unquote, losing their employer-based health insurance, right? And it is a talking point. It's a Republican talking point, but it is one Democrats are going to have to be ready to answer. And in fact, I actually was watching Morning Joe this morning, and and they were talking with Bernie, and the host, I think it was Mike Barnacle, and Bernie actually together answered it quite well, which is that, people say they like their employer-based health coverage, but in most cases, those are the people who say that are the ones who've never actually had to use it, because anybody who's really gotten sick and gone to a hospital has dealt with I think Barnacle talked about the casino of pharmaceutical issues, and there's also ambulance issues and emergency room and all the sort of crazy stuff that goes on, and the quote unquote private health insurance isn't so great if you actually need it, because in many cases there's all kinds of procedures you have to go to and forms filled out and triplicate, and doctors have to call to get things covered that should be covered. And I think so Bernie's point is it's not that you're losing anything, you're gaining something. There's only one thing I think that people want in their health coverage when it comes to choice, and that's choice of physicians. They don't need a choice of who's going to write a check to their physician or who's going to write a check to the hospital that they go to. They don't need a choice on that. If you have a single payer plan in which every doctor in America is part of the plan, then you have absolute choice. And if in that plan 100% of your costs are covered with no copays and no deductibles, what other choice would you want? A plan that covers less than 100% and makes you pay copays and makes you pay deductibles?
I'll take one of those.
No, of course not. Nobody would want that. So the point is to have proper coverage, full coverage, then with total choice of physicians. And I think maybe, not that I'm going to be on the stage next time, but maybe the candidates need to figure out how to explain that a little more clearly. I think they, the business about the taxes didn't come up last night like it did on Tuesday night. That's an important issue. But Warren, I thought, and Sanders did a good job there of saying, no, it's about cost.
Yes.
Nobody's going to be upset if instead of writing a $5,000 check to the insurance company for premiums, they instead write a $4,000 check to the government for premiums. And by the way, their coverage is much better and has no copay and no deductibles and total choice. Who's going to be upset with that? Is that raising taxes? That's a semantic question. It's lowering costs.
Yes. Well, I think that was certainly a good point, and one strongly made. I did get to see the clip of Elizabeth Warren fighting with Chris Matthews over that, and Matthews, and wanting so badly for her to just say, yes, your taxes will go up. And I mean, I could also see plenty of people complaining about it simply because it's a check to the government. But, if you actually sat and talked to them and said, well, as far as money leaving your account goes, either that hasn't changed or you actually let go of less. Isn't that a better thing? I can't imagine anybody but the most bitter partisans who are simply there to have an argument with you for no reason, saying, I paid less out of pocket, but it was bad because government. And there are such people, of course, but they too probably haven't been sick.
I've had this debate on One America News with this show. Actually, I'm doing the show again today, later today, talk about the debates. But yeah, the host is Liz Wheeler, and I made exactly this point. She said, well, but I'd rather have the choice. Well, choice of what? Choice to pay more for not as good coverage? I mean, come on.
Yeah. Well, I think you make an excellent point. No one, I don't know anybody that says, what the choice I'm talking about is who's going to reimburse my doctor. And the only reason there would be for wanting choice about that is one company I've had experience with is typically late and underpays, and I feel bad for my doctor versus someone else who pays on time. But if there's either no choice or everybody's getting paid on time and everything's working as it should, then yeah, I really don't care. So long as I don't get a hassle or I don't have to worry about on the way to the hospital in an ambulance, is this hospital in network? No, that's where no one wants a choice. Asking you on the gurney, do you want to go to this one or that one? I don't know. What's closest?
Right, and I'll give you a perfect example, from my own life of how frustrating even a quote-unquote good insurance can be. This is good insurance that I get through my union. I have dental coverage, which a lot of people don't have. Okay, so it was a case where we needed emergency dental care. Run to the dentist, a cracked tooth, run to the dentist. The dentist says, okay, we got to send you to a surgeon. but don't worry, Doctor So and So is in the network.
Yeah, right.
Great. We go there. The procedure is done. Everything comes out. I have to go deal with the front desk. Oh, Dr. X was actually on vacation. Dr. Y did the procedure.
No.
Oh, and Dr. Y isn't in your network.
Right.
Wow. Well, in Medicare for all, every American doctor is going to be in the network.
I guess so.
And I followed the rules. We asked the dentist who was referring to the surgeon, please refer us to somebody in the network. My dentist doesn't know who's on vacation in some other doctor's office, and that's just a perfect example of the gaps, even for people who have coverage in private run health insurance system. I didn't need a choice. I just wanted to be covered. Yeah.
Right. Well, and then I hear plenty of stories along similar lines. It's pretty much the same thing, right? People who that my surgeon is in network, my hospital is in network. Turns out after the fact, I find out my anesthesiologist wasn't. And by the way, have you ever heard anybody say, "Yeah, I'd like to hear the lineup of anesthesiologists. Who's good? I want to make some choices about that."
Right.
Now you go with what. Right. Whoever shows up, whoever the doctor chooses, whoever's on duty, whatever it is, I don't know. But yeah, that and of course the common experience of people just having to fight with their insurance companies. I guess to the extent anyone likes their employer provided insurance, it's because they work for a company that has an HR department that might actually take on some of the burden of fighting with your insurance company for you. But even then, it's not something you like. Per se, I'm thankful somebody else did this work for me, but once again, the company says things that were supposed to be covered are not, and you have to give us more money.
Exactly.
So, yeah, everyone's got that experience. So, all right, well, I'm glad they finally got a chance to, they did get a chance to discuss and debate that. I see climate crisis finally came up at one of the debates at some point last night as well. So, and an unremarkable round of debates, but no damage done at any rate. So
right,
I think we can take that away.
Right.
Okay.
Most debates are unremarkable, frankly. That's there are 30 of them.
Right,
like
true. It certainly feels that way. I don't think the next one is till September. They give us August off, which is fine by me. And as I said, though, the debate did give us a couple of days away from exclusive focus on Trump's incredible foray into blatant racism, which has come to fruition obviously we've seen it develop from the 1980s, really, and onward. But this has been the start of the week was really incredible. The weekend and the start of the week, we got to a place where, I don't know, I guess I had to anticipate it coming at some point, but I guess I thought it wasn't going to happen until the nominees were locked in and it was clear that the Trump campaign was simply going to fan the flames of what they used to call economic anxiety. But I'm seeing it happen this early. Lots of theories circulating about it. Well, he's trying to distract from one thing or another, and some of them have a pretty strong basis since Elijah Cummings, the target of his attacks, is close on his heels in an investigation that could become part of an impeachment inquiry at some point. But I don't think anybody believes that he really even needed that excuse to start in on this.
No, I don't think look, this is his MO. That's the reason why he picked Cummings and not some other target.
Right. Sure, could have been Adam Schiff.
Could have been anybody, right? But yeah, look, this, he attacks the credibility of anybody who comes after him, or he perceives as coming after him. And if the person on the other end is a person of color, that's all the better, because that's the best way for him to work, to get his people worked up. But as I've talked to you before, this is who he is. He is a child of the 60s. but not of the counterculture 60s, of the George Wallace, Richard Nixon Southern Strategy 60s, of the of the divided northern cities of the 60s, where you had white flight and fear and racial demagoguery around, in particular, Black and Hispanic people moving into different neighborhoods. This is Trump's, this is Trump's childhood playground, so to speak. It's where he came of age. He was in college in the 60s. It's where he learned his politics. He watched George Wallace. There was a really interesting op-ed piece by historian Kevin Cruz, who's very active on Twitter and is really a great commentator on this. And he talked about how Trump is in many ways worse than George Wallace, more open in his racism than George Wallace. With the business about Elijah Cummings and then broadening the attack to Al Sharpton when he saw the tweet of Al Sharpton, traveling to Baltimore. I mean, this is perfect because Al Sharpton pushes so many buttons. And Al Sharpton has done some terrible things, even though I think in the last 20 years he's been much more responsible. But certainly Trump, coming from New York, is especially attuned to somebody like Al Sharpton.
Yes.
This is what Trump does. His whole MO is designed to heighten white identity politics, white racial resentment, get white people about their racial identity, and you should be afraid of.
Well, he's certainly done his work on it over the past weekend and into this week, and as I said, things quieted down a little bit, but it's Thursday and the weekend's coming again, and I guess he'll be out of the control of whoever handles him, to the extent that he can be handled at the White House during the week. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back and pick up this discussion again. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Or read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We're still with Ian Reifowitz here, and moving on to the main topic of your segment here. I appreciate your carrying us through the debate discussion. I think those who watched probably saw pretty much the same, and no complaints so far, we'll say that much. But another key topic, of course, and timely, as I mentioned. You've written a piece that is already up and posted in your diary on Daily Kos and scheduled pretty soon, I think, to make an appearance on the front page addressing this. We can't wait much longer to discuss the roots of Trump's racism, like I said, because it's pretty topical. So your piece here, Trump's attacks on Sharpton are right out of Limbaugh's right-wing race-baiting playbook. We began discussing that just before the break. Let's pick it up there and talk about what's in here and what people can expect to read once it makes its front page debut if they haven't seen it already.
Right, sure. Well, thanks. So we're talking about Representative Cummings and then Sharpton and how Trump has been really attacking both of them. And Sharpton is this real boogeyman on the right. I mean, to some degree, I think he's not he doesn't have the same image in the mainstream media and broader American consciousness. But on the right, it's still 1985 on the right. He's still the Tawana Brawley guy.
Yeah, okay.
And again, those are deserved criticisms. I don't want to soft pedal that, but the point is he is a tremendous boogeyman on the right. And so, as you guys have discussed, and as we've discussed in my recent book, I looked at how Limbaugh, and the book is The Tribalization of Politics, and I looked at how Limbaugh, race baited about Obama. And one of the tactics he used toward Obama to quote unquote blacken Obama, and by that I meant blackening Obama, painting him as some kind of radical black nationalist or anti-white or something along those lines. And one of the ways he did that was to constantly tie Obama to Reverend Al Sharpton, often in combination with Reverend Jesse Jackson, another civil rights leader, maybe somewhat from the past, and who had made some nowhere near what Sharpton did, but Jesse Jackson with his Hymietown remarks had made some pretty awful, had used some awful words, let's say, but in a much larger career, Jackson certainly of pushing for positive change. Anyway, so just in terms of research, right? Jackson and Sharpton, I found, and I'll admit I might have even missed a few. I found 36 different shows, and with often multiple mentions on a particular show, 36 different shows where Trump tied Obama directly to either Sharpton or Reverend Jackson or both in this sort of attempt to quote unquote blacken him. And I'm not going to obviously go through them in the post, but go through them on the show. But in the post, I lay out at least a few of the examples. I'll just share one in particular that is, you can imagine how he does it when the topic is Black Lives Matter. He similar to Trump. Trump had said the other day that Al Sharpton was anti-white and anti-cop, hates whites and hates cops. That's very similar to the kind of stuff that Limbaugh did. But it didn't even have to be a topic about race. There was an example in 2010 when the Dalai Lama came to the White House. Okay, now you're thinking, what does the Dalai Lama have to do with Al Sharpton? Well, again, for those of you who remember the last time I was on here when we talked about Tiger Woods and sex romps, and you could ask what that has to do with Obama as well. This is the kind of thing Limbaugh does, right? So Dalai Lama comes to the White House, and Limbaugh attacks. He accused Obama and his White House of snubbing the Dalai Lama by escorting him, quote, out a back door. Meanwhile, Al Sharpton goes out the front door. Yes, I spoke with a little Negro dialect there. I can do that when I want to, end quote. I mean, literally out of nowhere, here we have Sharpton and racism. And
that is odd.
Right? I mean, it's crazy. What does this have to do with anything? But this is what Limbaugh does. Always, always, always getting his audience to remember that it is white, that it has a white identity, a white racial identity, and as we've talked about before, there are all kinds of studies that show that activating white voters to think about their white identity gets them to embrace more conservative positions. Democrats, right, have to figure out ways to counter that, not by not talking about racism, right? Can't do that because it's important to talk about this kind of rhetoric and stand against it, but then also, to figure out ways to get these voters who have these resentments to kind of deactivate them in the opposite of the way Limbaugh wants to activate them. And the way to deactivate them is to say, look, this is why Limbaugh or Trump or whoever talks this way. It is to get you thinking about your white identity and to get you angry at Al Sharpton or Barack Obama or whatever, person of color that they want you to get angry about, because they don't want you to think about the fact that Trump and the Republicans, aren't helping you. They're playing you for the fool. They want to distract you from the fact that their policies aren't going to help you and your family, and instead they want to get you worked up about the black person on TV or down the block or prior to 2016 in the White House. So that's their strategy. You don't ignore the racism, you don't deny the racism, but you don't just say racism is bad. For people who have some racial resentments of their own, but maybe are also possibly inclined to vote Democrat because they have some progressive leanings on other issues, or even have some mixed progressive and regressive views on race, right? People are not, for lack of a word, black and white. You have these Obama, Trump voters, you have these people who don't know, necessarily which way they go. They're thinking in racist terms in 1 second, and they're thinking in completely different terms in another second. Limbaugh's goal is to get them always thinking in racist terms, and our goal has to be to reach out in ways that show that we're against racism, but that also defang the attempts of people like Limbaugh and Trump to activate the racism. We've got to inoculate people against those kinds of that kind of racial demagoguery by showing what's really behind it.
Well, I'd love to be able to figure out sometimes what is behind it. The challenge to me sometimes of thinking about how to address and defang the particular brand of racism, particularly that Limbaugh deals in, and Trump. I have difficulty even classifying him vis-a-vis Limbaugh. I can't decide whether his racism is more blatant, either. I don't know whether that's because he's worse or he's just not even as articulate or as I don't know what, as sneaky and getting it into the conversation as Limbaugh is. I don't know how, but maybe you've got some ideas. I don't even know. Day to day, I always feel frustrated about it because how do you defang racism that has no basis in anything? There's somebody who can take the visit of the Dalai Lama to the White House and turn it into a racist attack on someone else is, obviously I guess he just can't. You're never going to convince him, oh, you know what, maybe I should stop being racist. But how do you even address it when it's so out of left field?
Well, you don't address the substance. You don't defend, you don't have to worry about the Dalai Lama.
And yet we do this very frequently. We see, like, for instance, the last weekend spent, well, actually, the demographics of Elijah Cummings' districts are, okay, all right. I don't know if that's effective or not. But I'm sorry, I didn't interrupt your answer. But
no, you make an excellent point. No, that the way you do that is you say, this is why Donald Trump is using this language. It's to get you worked up, because if he gets you worked up about Baltimore and infestation, and if he can draw you into a debate over whether or not he's racist or whether or not his language is racist, then you're not thinking about A, the things that Elijah Cummings is investigating, which are important, and B, you're certainly not thinking about his millionaire tax cut, which is exploding our deficit at your expense, unless you're in the top 1%. Or you're not thinking about the fact that apparently, according to what I read in the Times the other day, that his White House is thinking about using an executive action to give $100 billion over 10-year tax cut to people who own stock, which is 85% of the shares are owned by people in the top 10%. He's talking about indexing the capital gains tax to inflation, something that George H.W. Bush's White House looked into and said, no, the executive branch doesn't have the authority to unilaterally do that. It has to be done through legislation. Well, the Trump White House apparently is once again deciding that its executive action, can undo legislation. That's not what Trump wants. Joe Sixpack or whatever you want to call him out there. The white working class voter in Macomb County, Michigan. That's not what he wants that voter to be thinking about. He wants that voter to be thinking about the fact that, Al Sharpton and Elijah Cummings and Baltimore, and there's a lot of rats there. And and Trump is the one who's speaking the truth about that. What we have to be able to say is, no. The whole Sharpton, Cummings, rat infest, all of that stuff is so that you, voter in Macomb County, are so worked up that you don't notice that he's taking money out of your pocket and putting it in the pockets of millionaire investors. That's the whole point. And if we do that over and over and over again, what will happen is that that voter in Macomb County, when maybe the 10th time from now that Trump starts throwing racist stuff around, that voter will say to himself, not, oh yeah, Baltimore must be a pretty crappy place. That voter will say to himself, I know what Trump's doing. Because I know he wants me to think about race and not about the tax cuts for the millionaires. Yeah. And that's how you inoculate people. And that's how you have a message that is race conscious, that is pushes back hard against the racism and points out what's going on behind it by connecting it to the economic issues. There's a new book coming out, not by me,
Oh,
But I do look at the research. There's a new book coming out called Merge Left by Ian Haney Lopez, who's a law professor at Berkeley. He's done a lot. He has engaged in research with Demos, and they've tested out these different messages. And the message I talked about was called the race class message. He said, look, there's different ways that Democrats can message. Some Democrats, although not really, at this extreme, but some Democrats say don't talk about race at all, just focus on class. And then other Democrats say, when dealing with racism, no, you have to talk about racism, and that has to be the full thrust of what you do. You say racism is bad, and you have to attack it in those moral grounds only. What Lopez found, and this is about what campaigns and candidates should do, not necessarily what activists or regular people can do, because they have their own emotions to deal with. They're dealing with their own stuff. But campaigns and candidates, he said, the race only message and the class only message are not as effective, from what they found in their research, as this combined race-class message. It's race-aware. It's not denying the racism. But as I said, it tries to inoculate the voters by getting them to see why the Republicans are using the racist message. And it's to get them to be more angry at people in their own economic class. It's designed to get white voters to be more angry at the voters at the Americans of color with whom they share economic interests, so that they align themselves with the interests of the big business and the millionaires and the billionaires, rather than the people with whom they share economic interests and who economic policies, and whose conservative economic policies don't benefit the working class white voters any more than they benefit the voters of color. And so the argument is to get them to see that their racial resentments are in fact hurting their pocketbooks, and what they really need to do is align with the interests of those voters of color, Americans of color, who they really do have, who really would benefit from the same policies that they would, and recognize that it's the elites that are trying to operate on the basis of whiteness, because they have nothing else with which to bind working class whites to them.
Yeah, I guess nothing else would work. Well, that does help try and clarify the picture, and it's something that I keep getting reminded of each time there's one of these inflamed racist attacks from Trump. And but it's frustrating, I guess, to see some of the initial response. I don't know how you coordinate people on this other than simply to repeat this lesson and see if you can get more people on the same page. But yeah, a few days worth of responses like, well, there were some health code violations at the kitchen in Mar-a-Lago, and that means vermin, and so therefore something. So that's the end of the attack on Baltimore, everyone. And that surprisingly has never worked.
No. I think the key is you want to have a strategy. If you think about sort of reverse engineering, the Trump Limbaugh racist strategy, right, is designed to bind together white voters of different economic classes. And then there's the different democratic approaches, right? The sort of class only, ignore the race message doesn't work because it doesn't bring together enough democratic voters. The what you might call the race only message, what it often does is it reinforces the divide that the Trump Limbaugh message wants to set up, because the racist only message, essentially, it's the Hillary, there's a bunch of deplorables over there message. It says that racism is bad and Trump is bad and the people who like Trump are bad. And those people who have those sort of maybe sentiments towards Trump go, yeah, well, okay, I guess they're attacking me. It's Democrats versus white people.
Yeah, okay.
Right? This race class message that Lopez is talking about in Merge Left divides Trump away from the white voters he's trying to seek by telling those white voters that he's trying to harm them by getting them to act on racism. That's the key, is to divide the Republican politicians and the elites, the economic elites they serve, divide them from the voters that they are seeking. And if you can do that, even to 5% of their voters that they need, well, that's more than enough to swing a close election. More than enough. And given the way our presidential, electoral college works, anything you can do to peel off a few percent in these states is the difference between winning and losing. And the key, though, is that you have to have a message that can appeal to the people that you can peel off from Trump's coalition without betraying our values and without depressing the people who are 100% committed to the anti-racist message. That's why you have to. It's not even just both race and class. It's connecting race and class, connecting racism and class division. That's the key.
Well, I think it's an excellent strategy, and I think probably sometimes fall prey to the temptation to actually dispute the claim directly rather than remind people that this is about the division. You almost at some point get tired of being told in the heat of the moment that no, this is a distraction of sorts. Although that's become such a trite response to everything, but that there really is a serious message and a serious strategic thought behind it to remind people that what we need to do is to remind people that this is supposed to take your eye off a very particular ball, as opposed to simply just saying it's a distraction from something, even if we don't know what it is. But the temptation to debate the point is always enormous, because I guess that's the value of that particular kind of attack is it puts you immediately in this defensive mode, and your first instinct is to say, that's a dirty lie, and not only that, you're worse for the following reasons. But maybe not strategically the right answer. And as you point out, I mean, it's up in the air. I guess you'd have to be a big believer in the electoral college system to even be able to say with a clear conscience, well, Trump won the last election. It's hard to even say out loud, but it's that close. And I suppose you're right that when he's clinging to every vote he got last time as the only possible path to minority re-election, that peeling 5% off doesn't necessarily mean that we're converting them on every subject, but so long as people catch on at some point and say, I either can't sign on with this agenda of constant racial attack, or at the very least say, well, I even have some sympathies with it, but yet still this hurts me in innumerable ways, I'd rather see an end of it. At least coming out of the White House. I'm sure that there are people who say, I almost even have some sympathies with it, but I understand just traditionally that presidents of the United States are not supposed to engage in this sort of thing. The more genteel racists that we've had to deal with in our past might be, if not winnable, then at least losable for Trump. Maybe that's all that counts.
Right. I mean, like you said, the temptation is there to respond, but that's, it's funny. I was just thinking to myself that's a very progressive way of thinking. Well, if we just present the right facts.
Yeah, right.
No, this is not about facts. It's not about facts at all. Trump is not about facts at all. I mean, period.
Right.
It's about appealing to emotion. And yeah, like I said, there is a difference between the way you might address it in conversation, or I might address it in conversation with somebody on social media or whatever, and the way a campaign has to address it. A campaign has to emphasize a different way than certainly than way activists who have different goals and different purposes than political campaigns are going to operate. Yeah, in the Merge Left book, it's really got some great personal stories. He has this. Lopez talks about these two guys at the beginning of his research. He has this, he's interviewing people, and he's bringing in these sort of white working class people to get a sense of what motivates them, or what kind of message might work with them, but that also would appeal to voters of color. So he's talking to all these different groups, and he has this two guys, Matt and Tom, and they start out talking about racial stuff, and with a little bit of prompting, they share some things that are not, particularly racially progressive. But then as the conversation goes on, they also share some more thoughts that are more racially progressive. And you see that these thoughts and these attitudes are living in the same head, which are completely contradictory to one another. And I think that's how it is in a lot of people. It's one of the things I said in the book. We don't want to. It's unhelpful to look at at everybody and say they are either racist or not racist. There are people who have racist sentiments, and the goal is for us to convince them on election day to not act on them. Right?
Yes.
The political campaign is not going to change people from being, David Duke into being Martin Luther King. That's not possible for a political campaign on a large scale, and it's not even the goal of a political campaign necessarily. The goal is to get the person who might have voted for Trump to instead have voted for Hillary Clinton in 2016 or for whomever in 2020. That's the goal. And by electing those people, the better candidates, you can pass laws to change structures. That's the goal. The election is how you get the people in power to change the structures. The campaign is not how you change the structures by changing people's minds. That's not how it works.
Well, yeah, strategically, certainly, we do remember that, and we are reminded of it every once in a while. When Greg tells us, the idea, of course, is to come out the winner in the election, pretty much whatever it takes, and however you get people to, and in some cases you're asking them to not act on those racist thoughts and go the other way and affirmatively pull the lever. And I guess there's still, we see that happening mostly on the other side, but I suppose to the extent that you can depress the turnout or convince people that it's just simply too distasteful to pull the lever for Trump, so long as they don't do that, that works just as well for the select few, that 5% who may be persuadable. It may be just fine to persuade them not to show up that day as well.
Right. Right. Well, if you flip a voter from Democrat to Republican, you're helping yourself with two, right? Because you're taking one away from them and you're adding one to us.
To Democrat,
but if you get a Republican voter to not vote, let's say, or to vote third party, you're helping yourself half as much, but you're still helping yourself. You're gaining one rather than two.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it does work, and that's why they do it to us. But yeah, right. I definitely can appreciate that, and I appreciate the observation. Yeah, I guess it is a basic progressive instinct to be presented with some form of opposition. I mean, we should be able to separate out the difference between being offered a differing policy view and being confronted with racism. But our instinct, I guess, maybe part of our instinct is a built-in aversion to even acknowledging, if not acknowledging the racism, then confronting this outright, I guess, and saying, well, I'm used to having policy disagreements, and besides which, that's based on a lie. I'll disprove the lie. That I can do, or at least demonstrate that it's hypocritical. These are things that people are pretty adept at. But I guess it seems like a new thing to have to confront this being used so openly, even though certainly you and other historians, I guess historians of racism, and at least in this, historians of a lot of things, obviously, but racism is a major theme, and it's been going on for quite a while, that it's an old tactic to distract people from the topics that really matter by distracting them with race or racial resentment. And we still haven't gotten used to this thing on it, but maybe it's just because it's so virulent and so open and so crazy, and it's like the sort of thing that we've never seen before from a president that we lose our bearings. But
oh yeah, no, I mean, it's definitely new in terms of the volume and the openness. But I think, it's interesting. One of the words that you used was distasteful, and it doesn't seem to be, at least from what I saw, it doesn't seem to be that effective to get people to say, this is so distasteful that I'm not going to vote for it. Or at least people don't need to be convinced of that. Mm-hmm. People who feel that way without any kind of political convincing. The key is, I think, because it's an appeal to anger, is to flip the anger around, right? And get people to say, okay, they're trying to get me angry. They're trying to trick me. They're trying to fool me, but I see through it. And now I'm angry at them because they're playing me for the fool. So whenever I hear that racist language, I'm going to get angry at the people using the racist language, because I know that in doing that, they are think they can trick me. They think I'm so stupid that I'm going to fall for it, and that I'm going to fall for a message that is really designed to get me to vote against my own interests. And you don't fight an anger-based, emotion-based message with facts, and you don't even necessarily, for some voters at least, fight it with morality. You fight it with another way of motivating anger and resentment, but an anger and resentment at the people who are making, who are putting out that racist message, right? Rather than engage on the substance of the rats at Mar-a-Lago, you say, look at what they're trying to do. Don't fall for it. Be angry at them for treating you this way. That's a message that works.
I think I'm going to take that one away and try and put that in practice. It's a difficult thing. I mean, personally, of course, my reaction to these things is, man, I hope he would just drop dead already. But, but that doesn't really work as an electoral strategy either.
No. The candidates who have followed the drop dead opponent strategy have generally not won.
All right, so I'll stay away from that one if I'm campaigning, but I must reserve the right to say so on Twitter. Okay. I think I can at least do that. All right, you've given me quite a lot to think about, and I appreciate it. Let's wrap things up as we head to the top of the hour. I'll also give everybody a link to the Merge Left book that you mentioned, just so that everybody can maybe try and find it for themselves. And, of course, to your own book, The Tribalization of Politics. We'll be letting everybody know where they can pick that up. If they haven't done it already, it's time for them to do so. Thanks very much, Ian, for coming in both on the debate and on this important topic. Just not going away.
Well, it's always a pleasure, David. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Take care. We'll speak to you again soon, I'm sure, because he'll be racist this weekend, too. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. All right, what do you want to do with the second hour? We have plenty to catch up on, of course, and I had to make sure that the kids were shuffling out the door in the right direction, and I think everybody who needed to be out the door is actually gone now. I'll have to check in on them during the next break and make sure that they remember to take everything with them. But let's see. Let me check back in on Pocket and get the distraction of the Twitter machine back up here and make sure that we're not missing any important comments that may need to be included in today's show. All right. Let's see. We've got, look at this. Michael Musson bringing up an important story here in a roundabout sort of way. Let me go to the tweet he's included in his comment, and then we can give you the comment. It'll make much more sense in context. Just a weird Trump-Russia occurrence in the last day or so. I've got, we're tracing this back in time through the chain of custody here. It begins here with the tweet of Ann Rumsey Guerin, the Washington Post foreign policy and politics correspondent, as she describes herself in her Twitter bio. White House confirms Trump-Putin call reported hours ago by Russian state media. And again, we're back in this truly bizarre and very unique, let's say, situation in which the American press finds out about calls between the Russian and American government leaders, the presidents of the two countries, from the Russian media. The White House, the most transparent White House, whatever the hell he was making for himself, right? Most transparent White House ever, doesn't tell Americans when he communicates with the president of Russia. And of course, I mean, according to the reports that we get from Russian media, and which are confirmed by the White House, it's not because they were having a top secret conversation, or at least it's not because the White House is unwilling to pretend that it was some benign conversation. And it wouldn't be a very difficult lie. It wouldn't take up very much time to say, if you were in fact having a top secret conversation about the outright political merger of Russia and the United States, whatever, my own pet theory operating behind the scenes here, or I'll do whatever you want, Vladimir. Do you think he calls him Vlad? I'm just sort of curious about what they call one another in their calls, they must love the pomp and circumstance of it on both ends, so they probably call one another Mr. President. Anyway, even if the substance of the call is, what do you want me to do? How do you want me to handle something? Or I'm stuck. I don't understand how to deal with something. Won't you tell me what to do? I don't know exactly what the nature of their relationship is, what the nature of their discussions are. It's almost certainly not what's reported, but since you're going to lie about that regardless, why not put the lie out affirmatively? I think it's a weird place to start from, that the White House isn't affirmatively, proactively telling the American press, your president is doing things. I mean, even just from the perspective of, this is a particularly lazy White House which publishes blank schedules day after day for the lazy, couch potato TV addicted president. Here you have the opportunity to say the president will be talking with important world leaders, and, like putting on the tie and jacket that makes the president look important when he goes on television. Saying that he's talking with world leaders makes him sound important. I'm surprised that they pass up this opportunity, but I guess all the people working in the White House are as lazy and ignorant and stupid as the president is, and they don't realize, I'm supposed to be doing a job. A second layer of weirdness, of course, is that the Russian government is apparently more attuned to this and more forthcoming with information for the American media than the American government is. And only on the third level do we get to the question of, what did they actually talk about, or what do they say they actually talked about? And that's bizarre in itself. And in fact, it's so bizarre as to be unlikely, and so therefore probably a cover for a rather more sinister conversation about which they would understandably want to lie. They should be, President Trump should be impeached for doing it, and Putin should be reviled the world around for his part in doing the same. But whatever. Instead, we pretend that they're talking about benign subjects. Okay, so Ann Rumsey-Guerin reports the White House confirms that there was a Trump-Putin call reported hours ago by Russian state media, and I guess the White House confirms it thus. President Donald J. Trump spoke with President Vladimir Putin today and expressed concern over the vast wildfires afflicting Siberia. Really? The leaders also discussed trade between the two countries. That sounds perhaps more plausible. Maybe they realized, maybe they did talk about the wildfires in Siberia, but I would be surprised, for instance, that would be the topic of conversation at all. That, as they put it, President Trump spoke with Putin and expressed concern over the vast wildfires afflicting Siberia. Anyone want to give me odds on the idea that that Donald Trump was aware of vast wildfires afflicting Siberia? Were you aware of vast wildfires afflicting Siberia? I regard you, whoever you may be, as almost certainly smarter than Donald Trump, almost certainly better informed than Donald Trump. The idea that Donald Trump knows that there are wildfires in Siberia, unless he's just flat out, he's just a Russian guy top to bottom, and he actually, if he reads newspapers, they're Russian ones. I don't think so, but he's barely aware when there are wildfires here in the United States of where they are and what's going on. But I think that people inform him of it. I'm sure nobody wakes the president and says, the 3 a.m. call, Mr. President, Siberia is on fire. Really? I doubt it. Okay, so sorry to hear about it. And I mean, I guess it's possible that a normal president, you could convince me that a normal president, in anticipation of a phone call with Vladimir Putin, which would be unwise to, in ordinary circumstances to hold very frequently, but from time to time it would become necessary. I am sure that a normal president gets briefings and maybe even some little talking points cards ahead of time that would say, all right, we're going to brief you for an hour before the call. Here's what's going on. Here's the topics you really ought to be discussing. Here are some things that we would like you to press with him. And maybe also for the sake of keeping things conversational and diplomatic, you might also mention, I understand you're suffering from some wildfires in Siberia and they're causing some serious concern. Our sympathies are with you, and certainly if there's anything that we can do to help by way of loan of firefighting equipment, just let us know and we'll see if we can't arrange it, but hope all is well. But the idea that Trump engages in that kind of briefing and absorbs it, I find difficult to believe. Although maybe they just never stopped trying to brief the president, knowing it wouldn't work, but of course, all the important stuff went in one ear and out the other. But, wildfires. I know. I can say, gee whiz, sorry to hear about that. So I was surprised, as anybody else, I guess, to hear that would even make the grade for mention from the White House. And Sam Stein, I guess, felt the same thing. He's just commenting on it. The idea that Trump called Putin to discuss wildfires seems far-fetched, as he put it. And when Michael sent this thing on, of course, it was with the additional comment of he already talked to Finland's president about how they rake their forests. So maybe it's not all that far-fetched after all. He just loves to call world leaders about forest fires. I never knew that was such a topic of interest to him. I guess, I don't know. So I'm thinking about like Smokey Bear and Donald Trump. Both kind of large, shambling, hairy figures. I guess there could be some sort of affinity there. But beyond that, it'd be a mystery to me about why he'd be so interested in forest fires. My guess, of course, is that they spoke about other things. And then, of course, I guess to make it sound like it was really an actual call of some importance. We talked about trade between the two countries, because that comes up all the time. That's something that Trump is adept at throwing into his comments when he's stuck and realizes that I don't know what we talked about or what we're going to talk about. Lots of great things. We're talking about trade. We're going to do a bilateral, that things that are crutches for him. I imagine that's how that got in there. And it probably works the same way among members of his staff. All right. So anyway, other important items to bring up. I guess we are now approaching numbers that would bring us to, I don't know what the official count is, but the number of Democratic members of the House who are issuing statements of varying stridency, let's say, endorsing the idea of impeachment or impeachment inquiries, depending on how you want to put it and how much distance you want to put between yourself and the I word. But I guess we're now approaching the point where we're going to get to the tipping point, if we haven't already, of a majority of the House Democratic caucus having issued one of these statements. How serious they are, how committed they are to it, I don't know. But the point is, they're flipping a switch here from either a no or you haven't heard anything from me to a yeah, I'm actually willing to talk about this in public. And last I heard, we were at like 100. Last time I saw a number, it was 113. I think there have been more since then. People are talking about the acceleration or the number of members coming out for impeachment or impeachment inquiries anyway, since the Mueller hearings. I'd be curious, though, to chart it or to count the numbers. The numbers are too low in order to draw any real statistical conclusions. But I wonder whether they come faster since Mueller, or have they come faster since the Elijah Cummings attacks, I guess. And I don't know whether, they're directly related or whether it's just now it's a dam breaking effect. But I wondered whether any people got pushed over the edge by the racist attacks on Baltimore and Elijah Cummings. They were obviously headed, I think, towards impeachment anyway, and probably because of, they were probably planning on making that switch after Mueller, and because of the Mueller hearings, and even when they didn't produce the explosive results, people weren't running through the streets with their hair on fire, tearing it out, and screaming in protest right after, or even during the Mueller hearings. So they didn't produce that sort of effect. But, I wonder whether people who were preparing to move found their conversion accelerated by the racist attacks over the weekend and in the first couple days of the week. Anyway, we're now at the point where it's at or nearly at a majority of the caucus. Not that by itself does anything, but I think it hints at what's being hinted at here by a member of Congress himself, Ted Deutsch from Florida, who has this op-ed, I guess, in the Sun Sentinel from his home state. No more debate. Impeachment inquiry is underway. So let's take a look at that one and see what he has to say about this. Although Special Counsel Robert Mueller's testimony may not have been a summer blockbuster, it confirmed the damning conclusions of his report. The investigation revealed substantial evidence that President Trump obstructed justice and that the special counsel did not exonerate him. By the way, I just want to pause for a second to say this was clearly a strategy for some members. And in the end, if the entirety of the caucus flips the switch, there will be those who claim, and they may be right, that this was, in fact, the strategy, the 11-dimensional Nancy chess, Nancy Pelosi strategy of just letting Mueller hearings be the trigger. I want to point out that there's something very odd about it. It'll work because that's the way news cycles go in this country. And the fact that Mueller testified, it's an event, even if it wasn't the big blockbuster, it will be regarded as a proper triggering event that can explain these changes. But as Deutsch points out right here in the first sentence, the testimony may not have been a summer blockbuster, but it confirmed the damning conclusions of his report. So in other words, in March, we knew the damning conclusions for a certainty. What I mean is we knew what Mueller was going to say about them. We knew most damning, I think, parts of what happened already. So arguably this should have happened a long time ago, not just for strategic reasons and getting someplace before, before it's too late. But even if you just go by what Mueller has produced here, I mean, in March he put the thing out, and I would have hoped that Ted Deutsch, for all the good that this will perhaps do us, would have sat down and read the Mueller report at the time of its issuance and have said, the plain fact is this president deserves to face an impeachment inquiry, and I don't need to wait for Mueller to testify because the answers are all right here. And that's what Mueller thought was going to be the case, right? I don't need to testify. I'm not going to testify about anything more than what I told you now anyway. And that didn't really even turn out to be true either. He did embellish to some extent simply by answering the questions of, well, look, can you say that he was exonerated? Was that just a lie when he said that? Yeah. Okay. Well, that's worth something and all that. But, I guess I don't feel too proud of having another 50 members of Congress saying, oh, well, when they made this book into a movie, then I paid attention, even though, I don't read the books either. I wait for the movies. But that stuff's not important. I did go and buy the Mueller report. I did read it. And I just had hoped that more members of Congress would have done the same. They may have, and they may instead have said, well, I know it, but I have to wait for other people who didn't buy it and read it to know it, and that means television. So fine, I believe that. I guess it's just sad if that's the case. But 50-50, it may very well be the case that they said, I didn't have the time to read that. I'll wait for the television version of it. And okay, I didn't even watch that, or at least not much of it. And I now see that 20 of my colleagues, some of whom I actually know and recognize and like, are on board, and I feel safe doing it too. So fine. Anyway, let me read what Ted Deutsch had to say instead of complaining to you about what I have to say. Although that is a valuable part of the show. It's about 90% of the show, folks. Anyway, Ted Deutsch says, the investigation revealed substantial evidence that President Trump obstructed justice and the special counsel did not exonerate him. President Trump claimed victory. He seems to think that Mueller's performance wasn't enough to trigger an impeachment inquiry. Sorry, Mr. President, the question is no longer whether the House should vote to proceed with a formal impeachment inquiry. The inquiry has already begun. The Constitution gives the House of Representatives the sole authority of impeachment. You know that. Officially launching an impeachment inquiry has never been a prerequisite to using that authority. That's a good point. The Judiciary Committee may refer articles of impeachment to the whole House for a vote at any time. In the past, a resolution directing the Judiciary Committee to consider impeachment was needed to grant the committee additional subpoena authority and financial resources. That was the official start of an impeachment inquiry. But times have changed. In 2015, Republican leaders gave committee chairs broad subpoena powers that Chairman Nadler retains today. And that's another important point in all of this. Just as Republicans went out of their way, actually, to establish the precedent that you're not allowed to use the House floor to call the president a racist, one of the other things they did was give committee chairs greater subpoena powers with the idea in mind that they would use it to investigate Benghazi and Fast and Furious and Solyndra and whatever other things they were making up in their heads. Or for that matter, investigating Hillary Clinton's emails or the Clinton Foundation or whatever. This was designed to help them, and they may or may not have given any thought to the idea that Democrats could use the rules against a Republican president later on. I don't know. They may never have thought that far. It may not have mattered to them. They may have thought the Democrats would be too timid to do it. They may have thought they could simply lie their way or racism their way out of whatever investigations Democrats conducted. I don't know. Anyway, it's a good point. Republican leaders were the ones who left these rules behind, and he continues, no additional step is required. No magic words need to be uttered on the House floor. This is a question that comes up among the listenership every once in a while, and sometimes people direct those questions to me via Twitter. What would it take? For instance, when Armando was explaining to us that the existence of an impeachment inquiry, or even the hint that an impeachment inquiry might be either imminent or in the offing at some point, will tend to change the way that judges feel about cases that are before them right now that are being pressed by members of the House and committees in the House about whether or not they have access to certain otherwise privileged information. Armando's constantly reminding us, Rule 6E information, grand jury information. And we all, I guess, famously got that lesson taught to us with the release of the redacted version of the Mueller report. And Bill Barr's claim that I redacted so much of this because it's privilege, it's grand jury information, and we can't by law reveal that. And we went to some lengths to explain that there was judicial precedent out there for allowing the release of, or in fact demanding the release of Rule 6E covered grand jury information in the context of an impeachment inquiry. And so the question was, well, how do we trigger one of those? What form do I have to fill out in order to make a judge believe that there's an impeachment inquiry? And it's not quite that clear cut, but Deutsch's point here is that it's not like it used to be. There doesn't have to be a resolution of the Judiciary Committee. There doesn't have to be a resolution voted on the floor to grant any additional powers to the Judiciary Chair or any other committee chairman in order to legitimately claim that an impeachment inquiry is either imminent or already underway, whichever it will take to trigger this difference in the light in which judges see the demand for things like Rule 6E information. It used to be the case that there needed to be some additional authority granted to a committee chair in order to do these things, but it no longer is. Thanks both to the aftermath of Watergate, pardon me, and more recently, Republicans having accidentally or otherwise left these additional authorities behind for Democratic committee chairs to pick up on. The Judiciary Committee, he continues, officially started its investigation into the abuse of power by President Trump on March 4th, 2019. The stated purpose was to consider all constitutional remedies for presidential misconduct, including impeachment. So then what's the problem? Why all the agony in trying to get members to agree that they support the beginning of an impeachment inquiry? And I guess the answer is, I don't know. It's window dressing. They all were busy trying to distance themselves from impeachment until the time became right, whatever that is and whatever the reasoning for thinking it was right might be. But in fact, you could have pointed to something as early as March 4th of this year, which pretty closely coincides, I think, with when we actually got our hands on the Mueller report. I don't remember what the date was, but I believe it was released in March, right? The stated purpose of this investigation, I guess, this hearing, as we said, to consider all constitutional remedies for presidential misconduct, including impeachment. In every meaningful way, our investigation is an impeachment inquiry. The Judiciary Committee already has the power to refer articles of impeachment to the whole House. I would argue that any committee actually has that power. It's just that they traditionally look to the Judiciary Committee to handle those things. But I don't know what they would do. What if Elijah Cummings decided to refer articles of impeachment to the House floor? There's a good question for Nancy Pelosi. Would you be the one to tell him he has to pack up and go home? I don't think you would. The Trump administration, he continues, Deutsch in his piece here, has taken unprecedented and unconstitutional actions to ignore congressional subpoenas and pressure witnesses not to appear. President Trump has turned the White House into a black box. Ooh, that's a clever turn of phrase. The Justice Department fabricated a theory of blanket immunity and distorted claims of executive privilege. The administration wants to silence the witnesses to the president's obstruction. But the American people deserve to hear from former White House counsel Don McGahn under oath about whether the president, or rather when the president, ordered him to fire Mueller. And from Corey Lewandowski about when he was asked to narrow the scope of the investigation to protect the president, as though that was something he would be able to take care of. And from former Attorney General Jeff Sessions about President Trump's pressure campaign to take back control of the investigation. Remember, to pressure him to unrecuse. If the suggestion that we are already in the midst of an impeachment inquiry sounds far-fetched, look to last week's court filings by the House counsel. To break the administration's stonewalling, the House lawyers explained that the Constitution gives the House, quote, a constitutional power of the utmost gravity, recommendation of articles of impeachment. Since the Department of Justice policies won't allow the prosecution of a sitting president, only the House of Representatives can ensure that the president is not above the law. That is true. As we told the court, we already have the power. We don't need a vote. We need President Trump to stop obstructing. The committee has said repeatedly that impeachment is on the table. Legal experts, and now Robert Mueller himself, confirmed that the special counsel's investigation was never capable of holding a sitting president accountable. Justice Department regulations ensured that was the case. The remedies for presidential misconduct, including impeachment, are in Congress's hands. Now that we have Special Counsel Mueller's report and testimony, it is time for the witnesses of the president's wrongdoing to appear before the committee as part of our ongoing investigation. Well, there's only a little bit left, too, and I'll have to conclude it after this. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, with a brand new interruption to say thanks to all of you who support the show. Remember when I told you that our average monthly donation was about $7, for which you were getting 2 great hours of news and entertainment 5 days a week, and how that came out to about 70 cents an hour? That's a pretty good deal, except it's wrong. The math actually works out closer to 17 cents an hour. It is hard to beat a deal like that, and even harder to send your kids to college on. Thankfully, Patreon.com makes it easy to make that work. Patreon, Patreon.com, is the simple, secure way to make recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Just search for me or the show name on the site, and they make it easy to crowdfund the show so that the power of our numbers can keep the show going for just a few bucks a month. Once again, thanks so much for all your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio, and looking over the concluding paragraph or two of the op-ed here from Ted Deutsch. I think actually the more powerful close was the one we already gave, that simply restates that the remedies for presidential misconduct, including impeachment, are in Congress's hands. Now that we have Special Counsel Mueller's report and testimony, it's time for the witnesses to appear before the committee as part of our ongoing investigation. And I'll jump down to the final sentence here. We don't need to launch an impeachment inquiry. It has been underway since March. And we certainly hope so, because the filing that's now before the court depends, I think, at least as far as the outcome of getting a fuller view of the Mueller report, including all of the 6E material, depends on convincing the court, one, that yes, an impeachment inquiry is underway, or at least imminent, if you don't think the March 4th start date counts for some reason. And two, that does in fact entitle them to the 6E material. Now, again, according to actual precedent, it does, but legal realism moment, could a judge or even a panel of judges simply turn their backs on it and say, we don't freaking care because we're Republicans? Yeah, they can. And is there a remedy for that? Ultimately, no. Except, of course, simply saying, well, let's make it not matter anymore by declaring this man no longer president. That, of course, depends on the Senate, and there's no reason to believe that the Senate would react to the idea of ousting Donald Trump as president any better than Republican judges would. But who knows? Strange things are already afoot in this country, and I guess stranger things may yet happen. I will point this out, though. And I think we've all had these thoughts about the prospects of removal, if not impeachment, differentiating between the two. But I happened to see this get expressed again, probably, over the last weekend, and I didn't get to address it on the air, though I addressed it on Twitter. I saw a tweet from Ross Garber. Ross Garber is a blue check mark type of person. Why? Because they describe themselves this way. Ross says he's political investigations and impeachment lawyer. I didn't know there was such a thing. Legal analyst, writer, teaching political investigations and impeachment law at Tulane Law School. So really, I think maybe the description of this person is Tulane Law School professor, although they may not be a full professor. They may just be a lecturer or an adjunct professor. I don't know. What a specialty. Political investigations and impeachment. Okay. Well, at any rate, that's meant to qualify Ross Garber as some kind of expert in all of this. And he reminds us, I'm sure, like I said, we've all had these thoughts. If the House doesn't impeach Trump and he's reelected, I mean, remember that if we impeach Trump and we don't remove him for whatever reason, either we don't refer the articles of impeachment, we don't vote them out to the Senate, or we do vote them out to the Senate and the Senate refuses to convict, or whatever, pick your description of a failed impeachment. The big worry is, well, if we do this, then Trump will call it a vindication and be able to use it to leverage re-election for himself. And people usually pretty quickly respond, yeah, well, if you don't impeach him, he will use that as exoneration and leverage. Well, if I'm so bad, why didn't they even try to impeach me? And I think that could work. But Ross Garber puts it in this distinct way that allowed me to respond in a distinct way. If the House doesn't impeach Trump and he is reelected, he will have a potentially powerful argument that he can't then be impeached and removed during a second term for anything in the Mueller report or any other issues that were widely known before the election. Principle of condonation is how he ends this tweet. In other words, that Trump, in addition to saying, well, not only did they not convict me in the Senate, and so therefore I'm not guilty, and so therefore I've been vindicated, but people knew about this and it was put before the American people and I won re-election anyway. So now you can't impeach me for anything having to do with any of the things you already know about me, because the American people voted to condone my prior activities by re-electing me. And I just wanted to point out that's not just speculative. Right? So I guess this puts it on somewhat different footing. For instance, very frequently when you hear people say, well, I'm afraid that a failed impeachment or if we go too far, some people even just say that, even if the impeachment is ultimately successful, but we haven't concluded it by the time the election is held or something like that, it will look like we went too far. That is to say, Democrats, and people will react against it, and then, you'll be responsible for getting Donald Trump reelected. We don't want to do anything. I mean, serious commentators say this, right? They're regarded as serious, and some of them actually are serious and are okay as pundits go, but they somehow believe this, and they say things like, we shouldn't be messing around with this because we don't want to do anything. We don't even want to think about doing anything that might increase the risk that Trump would be reelected, right? But there's, of course, no substance to that. There's no proof that anybody can offer that says, well, that's one of the things that might might increase the risk of Trump being reelected. I just feel like it might. On the other hand, we have a thing like this where Ross Garber says, well, if we impeach him and he's reelected, or if we don't impeach him, rather, and he's reelected, then he will, one, be able to claim vindication, but two, be able to say, you can't even start an impeachment inquiry on me. I mean, what if you adopt this position? Well, we won't impeach him because we want to increase the risk that he's going to win re-election. But he wins re-election anyway because Russia hands it to him again, or whatever your theory is. He ends up in the White House. I mean, obviously there's a chance that could happen, right? So if that does happen, there's supposedly no chance that he can get a third term, right? I mean, according to the rules, you're not supposed to be able to have that happen. But as we know, LOL, YOLO, nothing matters. There are no rules. But according to the rules, that's no longer a part of the equation. There's no more danger of re-electing Trump a third time. So theoretically, if you haven't, or even if you have, tried to impeach him based on the Mueller report, now some bombshell comes out, finally confirming the truth or undeniable truth of some aspect, or some new angle on it comes out, or the P-tape is real, whatever it is. It will be Trump's claim, and it might not matter in the end because you might just convict him anyway, but it will be Trump's claim that, no, you can't try me in the Senate for something that was originally revealed in the Mueller report. The people have condoned my activities by allowing Russia to vote for them and return me to the White House. That and the third term being off the table, you might as well give it a shot, right? He'll just say it's irrelevant. What I wanted to differentiate between here was the speculative idea that we don't want to do anything that would increase the risk of his reelection, and the not speculative, but rather historical proof that, yes, this is something that at least Republican presidents say. It could be that you could find me an example of other people saying it, maybe not about such an extreme example as the highly impeachable crimes of Donald Trump, but is it a guess that a Republican president would say, you didn't impeach me and I was reelected, therefore you have condoned my activity and you can't even attack me about it. You can't even mention it anymore because it's been given the thumbs up by the electorate. It's not a guess. It happened. We've seen it. You might not recognize it simply by calling it principle of condonation. You say, that sounds original and interesting. I don't believe I've heard that one before. Well, have you heard this one? Accountability moment. Have you any recollection of George W. Bush saying, we've had our accountability moment and I won. You can't go after me about detainee policy or torture or warrantless wiretapping because we've had our election. Thanks, New York Times, for agreeing not to bring the subject up during the election. One of the more amazing things. Still, I think the pinnacle, the peak, just peak New York Times, I don't know what the hell you want to call it, but a peak New York Times moment. There may just be no other way of describing it. That imagine the New York Times coming to the conclusion that it didn't want to influence the outcome of an election by reporting facts already in evidence, I guess they weren't in general evidence at the time. They agreed to suppress them until after the election. We don't want people to know what the president's been up to, because if they know what he's been up to, they'll be able to decide whether or not to make him president a second time. And that would be ridiculous for a newspaper, a national newspaper, to participate in. It's clearly the policy of the New York Times that the American people be allowed to vote in the dark, in utter ignorance of what the president's been doing. If you hold the president to account, people will know what he's been up to and will be able to decide for themselves whether or not he's worthy of a second term's worth of trust. And that would be stupid because we're a newspaper. I can't believe that happened, but it did. And similarly, I can't believe that George W. Bush got away with saying, yeah, I've had my accountability moment and I won the election in 2004 and that's that. I'm president and anything I did is now A-OK. You had your chance. You blew it. We didn't have our chance. The newspapers refused to give us our chance. But we had imagine, too, claiming you had an accountability moment and it's over. You missed it. You didn't know you didn't know it was an accountability moment because they forgot or refused to tell you what I should be held accountable for at that accountability moment. But the point is, there was a moment at which I could have been held accountable had you known what I should have been held accountable for. And, well, I don't know. Maybe the best time to tell you is in December after you've held me accountable. Guess what you didn't hold me accountable for, idiots? Warrantless wiretapping. Ha ha. Oh, well, the moment has come and gone. That's where the accountability lies. It's not my fault that you didn't know it. It's the New York Times' fault. I've always said they suck. They're a-holes. Big time, right? I mean, before there was fake news, there was big time. That guy's a real a-hole, right? And that was supposed to be generally applicable, I think, to the entire New York Times staff. Anyway, I just thought that was of some direct impact and of some great interest here. We have seen this happen before, so it's a little easier to conclude that we are in danger of seeing it happen again. Anyway, wanted to make sure you had that one. Let's see. Other items of interest. Let's scroll back up towards the top here. By the way, I guess good follow-up on the supposition that Donald Trump would try to ignore the law with respect to naming an acting director for the office of the director, an acting director of national intelligence, pending the eventual withdrawal of Ratcliffe and, if that actually happens. But we pointed out for you that we had the tweet from, I don't even recall offhand who it was, but I think Jones' write-up of, Robert Chesney at Lawfare. We had his tweet saying, it's the law is clear and the job belongs to the deputy director, however they term that, whatever the actual title is. And so he's got no flexibility in that, and he can't just name his own person. But guess what? He's going to try anyway. Joan wrote this up for the front page the other day, ran on front page, I think, on Tuesday here, or at least it was written up on Tuesday. Trump trying to illegally name an acting director for intelligence post, bypassing deputy. So that was an easy prediction. The occupier of the Oval Office, she says, has suggested via tweet, of course, that pending the confirmation of his lackey and conspiracy theorist John Ratcliffe as DNI, he'll choose an acting director for the organization. Furthermore, CNN reports that he, quote, may go outside the normal protocol, unquote, i.e. break the law. I may go outside the protocol here in withdrawing funds from this bank, right? Outside the normal protocol. By bypassing ODNI Deputy Director Sue Gordon as the acting chief during the confirmation process, National Security reporter Natasha Bertrand says her sources tell her Gordon has been informed she, quote, would not be considered to replace Coates and that she would not be selected to serve as the acting, which came as a surprise to her and other intel professionals because they thought law would control. How dumb is that? That might be surprising because what the administration is calling outside the normal protocol is illegal. Well, it's not the administration. I don't know, maybe the administration seeded CNN with that language. We may go outside the normal protocol. Well, CNN now reports they may go outside the normal protocol. Look up what the protocol is, CNN. It doesn't take but a few minutes, and you'll find out that there's strict requirements of law, and going outside of that is called breaking the law. Anyway, Robert Chesney, as we said, actually wrote it up long form at Lawfare, saying the president does not have discretion in this matter, however, so long as there is a current principal deputy. The question comes down to which statute rules in this situation. So there's a gray area, I guess. The Federal Vacancies Reform Act, which gives the president great flexibility and discretion, or the 2004 statute called the Intelligence Reform and Terrorism Prevention Act that created the office of ODNI and the director position. In Chesney's reading of the statutes, the IRTPA rules, and Gordon would be the deputy by law. It is specifically on point for this office and situation. Its language is not vague. Its language is not ambiguous. It uses the compulsory word shall in order to vest the acting director role in the principal deputy in this specific scenario. Ordinarily, under normal circumstances, it would be very difficult for courts to ignore this very direct instruction to them. For this particular office, which is created by this statute, this section of this statute says what to do in the event of a vacancy in the ODNI. Back to Jones' write-up. But there's a bad precedent that comes immediately to mind, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. In this same situation, remember, CFPB also a latter-day creation, just like ODNI, and of late, it's been the habit of Congress in creating these things, particularly where Democrats create these things, or have a considerable hand in creating them anyway. But it's been the habit of late to lay out specifics for succession because they've seen shenanigans in succession in other departments and bureaus before. So I guess the default rule comes from the Federal Vacancies Reform Act, and agencies created since then have frequently had their own specific rules about succession, which are meant to supersede the background Federal Vacancies Reform Act. However, in a similar situation at the CFPB, in this same situation, the White House Office of Legal Counsel overrode the statute. That is, the statute post FVRA that created the CFPB and set out its rules for succession. The White House Office of Legal Counsel, OLC, that's the same OLC that wrote the memo that says you can't indict the president. They overrode this statute, creating the CFPB, and the position, and an appeals court agreed with the White House OLC in that case. Chesney argues that the statute for the DNI position is stronger than the CFPB law because the CFPB had a provision akin to the language in which the IRTPA, that is the law that created the Director of National Intelligence position, the IRTPA addresses the FVRA. I'll have to start the sentence over again just so you can catch the drift of it. Chesney argues the statute for the DNI position is stronger than the CFPB law because the CFPB had a provision akin to the language in which the IRTPA addresses the FVRA as to all other ODNI offices, but expressly excludes the DNI position from that analysis. In other words, they said in the IRTPA, we acknowledge the existence of the FVRA as the default rule. However, with respect to the DNI position itself, the Director of National Intelligence, that one position needs to have its succession handled in this particular way. That means the statute makes clear that among all the positions in the office of the DNI, the one the president doesn't get to mess around with is the director and the directorship itself. This was on purpose. Congress was trying very hard in creating this position to keep it from being partisan and allowing it to elevate career professionals over toadies. As Joan puts it, Ratcliffe is a toady, one who has lied about his intelligence and national security experience. He has none. And has probably lied about more than that. He's woefully unqualified for the job and is largely up for it because he won't try to curtail Russian interference in our elections and the Trump administration. Trump is trying to force out a well-qualified and respected woman, Susan Gordon, and illegally install his own people, which is a very dangerous thing. It's also one more thing to add to the articles of impeachment against him. Yes, very true, and well worth consideration. Okay. Let's see. Oh, Mike Musson was observing on the accountability moment question. How about the obvious thing that Nixon was certainly going to be impeached after his accountability moment? Yeah, I mean, there is that. But then again, I will point out, they didn't impeach him. Everyone supposedly knew it was inevitable, and it probably was, but they didn't get around to making that impeachment. And of course, at that point, the countervailing argument would probably have been, I mean, there were certainly arguments akin to that made. One of the difficulties with making the argument that the 1974 accountability moment absolved Nixon of all prior crimes is, of course, that the crime in question here, in terms of impeachment articles that survived the Judiciary Committee and were set to be reported to the full House for a vote, the articles of impeachment stemmed from crimes committed during the accountability moment. So there is a problem with that. I mean, Trump's crimes, well, some number of his crimes, many of his most important crimes, also stemmed from activity during his first accountability moment, I guess, before he was president. I don't know. Does that count as an accountability moment? I mean, he wasn't being held accountable for anything he had done beforehand, but it did, I think, in that sense, differs in kind. The accountability moment itself was tainted by the very things he was being impeached for. And also, of course, the counter argument, always available, and it should absolutely be used if this comes up in Trump's case. There were accountability moments for members of Congress, too. And in 1974, you had an overwhelming shift towards Democrats, and the Democratic majority in the House and Senate were greater by some significant percentage than they had been in a long time. The Watergate babies were brought into Congress on the, I guess, the negative coattails of Watergate. So it was a lot harder, I think, to make that claim. Not that it ever really should work that way. And maybe we were in maybe the unique position was George W. Bush's claim. Maybe that was the unique moment in history, given the extraordinary challenges after 9/11 and the extraordinary position in which he had managed to back Democrats into this corner of being afraid to oppose the president or Republicans in general for fear of being branded terrorist lovers themselves and unpatriotic and traitors, etc. All the things, of course, we now know to be true of Donald Trump. But okay. Let's see. Another observation from Mike here saying Trump nominating Ratcliffe would also be illegal since the statute that creates the DNI position says the nominee shall have extensive national security experience and management experience. And that's true, although that would require some interpretive work and for the courts to sit down. I mean, that may never really work, quite honestly. It would require courts to sit down and ponder someone's experience and decide whether or not it was significant enough. That's just one of those things that I guess when push comes to shove end up being throwaway language, because the courts will almost never ordinarily insert themselves into that and to say, yeah, we think that his, the nominee's national security experience and management experience isn't enough. He's the man says he managed a McDonald's, and that's really all there is to it. And who knows? Maybe there were corporate espionage issues that he dealt. They just aren't going to insert themselves into that process. So I don't think that's going anywhere. But it is true that they do require that. And on the other hand, the courts may say, well, there's this requirement and we're never going to touch that one. So given the CFPB precedent, which wrongly decided though it may have been, is on the books as precedent, and the reasoning holds here too. It was wrong there, but we can use the same wrong reasoning here. And given that we're telling you up front that this other requirement is garbage and we're never going to touch it, if this part of the statute is garbage and we're never going to touch it, maybe that part of the statute is garbage and we're never going to touch it. We don't really know. We just don't know how they're going to approach this thing. Everything is up in the air. And like Joan says, I mean, really straightening it out, maybe the best thing to do is to use the momentum towards impeachment. We might have to make the articles of impeachment a real Christmas tree here and just hang everything we've got on it and say, if we ever validate the idea that the president is at least being rebuked by an impeachment, we might as well throw this one in there too, and thereby, create the possibility that one day someone might be able to leverage this against another future president who tries to do the same thing. Donald Trump was facing impeachment for that. Yeah, well, they never impeached him, or they never convicted him. Well, that's not the issue. The question is it an impeachable offense? And the answer is now yes. It may not be a removable offense, but is it impeachable? Sure. Let's have that discussion. That may work. that might be something to consider in the future. And by the way, when I was musing earlier about whether or not people were breaking towards impeachment because of the racist incidents over the weekend, I'm to the extent that is possible or even true, or people would even admit that it moved them towards the end of the process, throw Al Green's counts in there too. See what happens. There were a couple other counts against Nixon that didn't make it out of committee, like the illegal war in Cambodia. Too bad they didn't include that one, because that too could have been used to tamp down on future wrongdoing by presidents, but we missed the opportunity to do that. Just as we missed the opportunity to tell you, or spend more time telling you about what's coming next on Justice Putnam's show, the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. But it is coming next.
From Daily Kos Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
All right, here's what he's got on tap. Among other things, the North Carolina Republican operative already charged in a ballot fraud scheme was just charged with ballot rigging in another race. This guy can't stop himself. Maybe no one in North Carolina can. Wow, overall crime in America has declined, but violent crimes by white supremacists have hit a decade high.